Welcome, everybody. My name is Roger Durling. I'm the executive director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and we're joined today by Max Barbakow, director of the hit of this summer, Palm Springs. Max, um, uh, Palm Springs is his first narrative feature debut, starring Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti and J.K. Simmons. And it premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, where it was acquired by Neon in the biggest paycheck in Sundance history. His previous film include The Duke, based on the memoir I'm the Duke by J.P. Duke. And it was Max's thesis at the AFI Conservatory, where he earned his master's in fine arts and directing. The film premiered at Tribeca. It won awards at Hamptons and other film festivals, and it was shortlisted for a BAFTA award. It was also shown here in Santa Barbara. He also wrote and directed Mommy, I'm a Bastard, which was shown here at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and it was an autobiographical feature documentary about his adoption. And Max is a graduate of Yale University. He also trained with Werner Herzog and attended the Escuela Internacional de Cine in Cuba. His next film is gonna be Good, Bad, and Undead, starring Peter Dinklage and Jason Momoa for Legendary Pictures. And I've interviewed many directors in the past, but none can I claim that I have known for many, many years. And I was a barista, and I would make hot chocolates to this young man while he was attending Crane School. So this is quite an honor, and to have you,
and the muffaletta sandwich too.
And the muffaletta sandwich. I should point out that Palm Springs has gotten, is 95% of Rotten Tomatoes. The New York Times named it its critics pick. And I should point out that Tony Scott is a very tough critic to please, and Palm Springs pleased them. And the Hollywood Reporter has said that pointlessness, isolation, and the guarantee that no one will ever understand your plight may not sound like the makings of a laugh-filled heartwarmer, but in the hands of Max Barbakow and screenwriter Andy Sierra, it is. So welcome, Max. What an honor to have you. Pleasure. How has this journey been so far for you?
Incredibly surreal. And after the movie coming out last night, I can't think of a better way to spend Saturday than, I'm not back home, and I'm in LA, but back home, in the presence of a film festival, and honestly a mentor in you, and a great influence in my cinematic education. I've been to so many cinema societies, and hearing interviews with filmmakers and getting to be in their presence made it all seem more possible. So it's all surreal, but this is kind of the perfect cap for the last 24 hours. And it's super gratifying. We just wanted to make something coming out of film school that felt very true to us. So to be able to make something, and I think we accomplished that now people are responding to in the ways that we intended, is incredible.
A lot has been said about the timeliness, about how prescient the film is about our current condition. A lot has been said about the ingenuity of the film. The one thing that I want to talk to you from the get-go is that you obviously are passionately in love with film, and you actually are very knowledgeable about film. And from my vantage point, watching the film and watching the influences and the homages that you do throughout the film is the real treasure trove for me. And your homage to Paolo Sorrentino, to filmmakers like Richard Linklater, to Saving Private Ryan, and I could go on and on with the quotations and salutes that you make throughout the film. Palm Springs, I'm talking about. Can you tell us about those flashes of where you show your knowledge and passion for film?
When I feel like when I'm working on something very early on, as you have a seed and the spark of an idea, and then you're just trying to build on that. A really good way of procrastination is to consume and try to feed that idea. So initially it kind of starts with that. I like hoarding stuff and just putting it on the shelf, stuff that I think is relevant, references, literature, movies, music, playlists are huge, and music is a big part of this movie as well. In terms of this movie, it really started as a collaboration and ended as a collaboration with Andy Ciara, the screenwriter, and I in his little bungalow in Silver Lake, trying to entertain each other and figure our relationships out and our lives out in the wake of a film school experience that was very intense and like you were living in a bubble for a little bit. So a lot of it was trying to make a movie that felt true to us and throw everything against the wall that we wanted to see in something, and it inevitably turned to discussions about the stuff that we liked. And so The Great Beauty was a big thing, just that dance sequence, which on the page with this movie was a little more ambitious. We obviously didn't match Paulo Sorrentino, but seeing a movie about existential despair and inspiration that was so beautiful was huge for us. You know, the grounded nature of the Richard Linklater stuff was always a North Star. You know, Eastbound and Down was something that Andy and I, the Danny McBride HBO show, something that we talked about very early on in film school when we met, just about how that show can make you laugh and also make you cry in the same scene, and also feature toxic characters that are using their toxicity and their shame kind of as like a self-defense mechanism against vulnerability. So it was about, with this collaborator, speaking the same language. And in terms of the film, the cinematic nods, you mentioned Saving Private Ryan, which and I think we also arguably have a Zero Dark 30 scene in our movie as well, in a J.K. Simmons sequence. It's kind of a repetitive film with, you know, a lot of vignettes. It's kind of a series of short films. So the joy in creating it became about, okay, this could be our moment to do this kind of scene. You know, this could be our Saving Private Ryan moment with beer cans coming through the pool. You know, we could like sit back and do the Linklater thing now because we've earned enough hijinks. And even movies like, there's a big montage in the middle where Sarah and Niles let loose and kind of fall in love in a way, like a movie like Boogie Nights. That's so, you know, there's montages in that movie that span the, you know, two different songs coming together, and we somehow managed to do a sequence where there's, you know, a fade between songs. There's 3 songs, I guess, in that sequence too. So it was a really cool process with Andy, and down the line too with The Lonely Island and the other Andy, really just geeking out on stuff, no matter highbrow or lowbrow it was, to kind of just keep that creative juice flowing as you're making a movie, which is such a marathon. Just trying to protect the idea and keep it good.
You mentioned
the entire process.
Sorry to interrupt, but you had mentioned, which I want to latch on, the idea of short films, and what you're referring to, which it's like every time the characters, you know, repeat themselves, they wake up, it's almost like a short film, you know, right? Is that what you're referring to? Is that every time there is the restart, it's almost it feels like it has a different tone. It feels like a new short film, as you referred.
Absolutely, you know, as a time loop film, that was part of the fun with it, and like the initial idea for doing a movie, like we created these characters and kind of tried to put them in their personal hells. Sarah and Niles just as 2 commitment phobes, afraid of kind of confronting their inadequacies, and you know, that felt like being stuck living the same day over and over again at a wedding was a good way to do that. So that's kind of where the time loop came from. But then once you do that, you think about, oh, this as a first movie, this is a really fun first movie to make, because you can really focus on each vignette. And it's not about exploring how cool a time loop idea is per se, because we know that it's this amazing subgenre that started with Groundhog Day and has become it's so vital to cinema in general. But it's how can we skirt past the metaphysics and the plotting of it, and then just, you know, indulge the opportunities that it gives us. So and follow the characters. You're seeing similar moments play out over and over again, but in different ways depending on the character's emotions. And we always wanted to do something totally blended tonally. So being able to tell, or to photograph different short films and to kind of conceive of different rides, on this big roller coaster, different segments of the ride. It was just so fun.
You talk about tone, and that's how challenging, or maybe it was fun to find a tone to a film that it has there is a philosophical aspect to this film. There is great comedy, physical and slapstick comedy. There is romance. There is existential conversations. How was that always in the script, managing the different shifts in tone in the film?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, Andy and I, that's the kind of stuff that we get off on, is that manages to make you feel all sort of different things at once while entertaining you. So it really started the script from these philosophical conversations that are still kind of at the core of the movie between us about our relationships and our confusion about the world after coming out of like a very structured existence into like a more free form one. But it was always about kind of letting the characters guide that and keeping the story really grounded emotionally and making that their journeys make sense even within this heightened world. Tonally, it's something you try to get right on the page, and I think it's something that Andy Samberg was attracted to when he read it. He got the tone, and to have a partner like that take us under his wing and kind of protect that and understand what we were after in the movie was invaluable, because it could have, I feel like, gotten diluted in other hands. But it's just something that you make sure to give yourself enough options to capture while shooting, doing different versions of the scene, the happy version, the goofy version, the really grounded version, and then also giving yourself in that way options for the edit to kind of make sure that you could hit all the bass notes. It's what makes it really fun for me.
There is true anger in this film, and there's true pain felt in this film, and I think that that's one of the reasons why the comedy plays so well, because you actually have balanced it or grounded it in real loneliness and real anger, desperation, and as I said, pain. Is that did the film start to? Were you always, you and Andy, knowing that there was going to be this balance of pain and comedy, or you saw it as this sort of Jungian exploration journey about this character?
It definitely started with Young. The movie started in a way darker place. It started as more of a hipster leaving Las Vegas, like a hipster goes to Las Vegas to die. And we started working on it the year of like Anomalisa and The Lobster, and these really blended comedies, these half-hour comedies, dramedies on TV, like the first season of Fleabag and Atlanta and Catastrophe. Like those were all, it made that kind of comedy possible. So I would say we were driven more by the messiness of characters rather than writing jokes. Like before working with The Lonely Island, Andy Ciara and I both joked like, oh, we don't really know how to write jokes. Like we just, like it was about making each other laugh and making each other feel things. Now we know how to make something really funny after working with those guys. But I think it was always more grounded, honestly, in the emotion, just because we're both softies. And what came out naturally was, and anger too, what came out naturally was just kind of a tragicomic kind of tone, just because I think that's what we're attracted to.
Did you always understand the big sort of allegory of having this happening at a wedding, that it's in the desert, and you have not only the contrast of somebody who is who's miserable in his life and has to witness somebody's happiness unfold day to day, which is a wedding, what a wedding's all about.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, it's contrasted with this cosmic world of the desert, because whenever I think of the desert, I think of, maybe it's just me, but I think of the desert as this cosmic world. And did you always understand that dynamic from the get-go when you started writing the piece?
It took us an embarrassingly long time to figure out, because it started as this kind of sojourn, this solo Niles story, out into the desert. Llewyn Davis was another movie that we were thinking a lot about when we started working on it. And there was a moment where Andy got married in Palm Springs in 2016, I think, where it became a wedding movie. It's like, this is perfect. This is kind of like compact. So the desert was in play, and then the wedding came into play kind of after that. But like the desert was always something that was super fascinating, even thinking about films that really capture that landscapes and desolation, like landscapes as a way to look at emotional terrain, they're so epic and they make you feel things. Like Paris, Texas, I remember, was a movie that we were talking about a lot, like what that movie does for the solitary figure in a landscape, and just that, like the kind of feeling that it evokes. But so we knew we wanted that, and then once we got over our pretensions and we're like, oh, in a wedding movie, we could throw that in there, and it's kind of like a little more high concept and immediately identifiable, because the wedding rom-com is something that that's evergreen, just like a time loop movie. So people kind of could have a way in that way. We could disarm them with some jokes and some comedy, and maybe get to like the deeper, more existential stuff that a desert landscape can offer you. That was always kind of the trick we were after, is to kind of trick people into feeling stuff.
I mean, you've mentioned Groundhog Day and the fact that this, that became your North Star, but you do something different in the fact that Groundhog Day and time loop films that we've seen in the past, we start at the beginning when the person first realizes what is happening, and then it develops from then on. In this narrative, Andy's character, Andy Samberg's Niles, has been, we're like almost, we walk in medias res. This has been going on for a while, and then Sarah drops in, which is a new part of this subgenre that you've further on by adding another character joining the loop. Is that, when did that come into the development, understanding that your main character should have been in this world for a while?
That came pretty early, to be honest, because it's the same thing with doing a time loop movie and not wanting to spend too much time on the mechanics of like exposition. I think in filmmaking is the hardest thing, because especially now we're so narratively and visually literate that you kind of know what movie you're stepping into immediately. We watch so much stuff. I watch so much stuff. So we never wanted to condescend to an audience or spend bandwidth explaining plot, because that just isn't interesting. So once we figured out we were doing a time loop thing, and also probably born out of insecurity about doing that, we're like, people they'll know going in what's happening, what's the most interesting thing. And the scene that kind of locked it into place was, or a sequence, I should say, was that great beauty dance stuff, with a man knowing all the moves on a dance floor. And also the speech just felt like something fun to write, like a speech that a man is giving where he knows everything about everybody at the wedding and no one knows who he is. It was kind of like that kind of locked it into place. And then Sarah took a long time to kind of like figure out. There was a version of the in development where we always knew it was kind of a two-hander, but as we were thinking about this Jungian thing that we couldn't ever crack, and you kind of see shades of that with Roy and other kind of people that he meets along the way. He always kind of had a buddy, this Niles character in this story. There was a version of it where the Jerry character, Jerry Schlieffen, was more of like a cosmic Buddha presence, and that was kind of like a buddy movie. But once we stumbled upon Sarah and we were talking again about our relationships and Andy's marriage, and just life and the importance of commitment and intimacy in a really confusing world and vulnerability, it's like, oh, this is a love story. Let's like get out of our heads, get out of the ideas about what this wants to be, and center it kind of on the emotions that we're thinking about. And then the Roy character honestly came super late, because I think that's also a shift kind of from, and you could read the movie too, and there might be, not pointing finger, there might be more people in the loop than we think there are in the film as well. Yeah.
Without spoiling to those who haven't seen the film,
Yeah.
but yes, the June Squibb character, yeah.
But Roy came super late too, where it was one of these things. You have a movie that works, it's a 2 minutes, it's a love story, but there was a lack of urgency kind of, and you needed another kind of, Sarah's the emotional catalyst of the movie, and Niles is so passive and indifferent, and that's kind of what makes it interesting, but we still needed something else, kind of like this ticking clock. And that's where the Roy character came from. I read an article about a man living a double life in the LA Times that was just super insane. He was like the dean of the USC film school and was living this double life, or the USC medical school a couple years back. And it kind of inspired Roy in thinking about raising Arizona in a way too, and how in that movie you're cutting back to the dude on the bike who's kind of, who's after them every once in a while, and it gives you some urgency. So creating that character kind of came late, but it made that also, I think, differentiates it, in that you have 3 at the bare minimum people in the loop.
Which is, this film requires you to watch a few times. And for those who are watching this and have seen the film, trust me, go watch it again and you'll see a completely different film, because watching it a second time, when Sarah and Niles are first talking, Niles is nervously looking over the bushes, and when I was first saw it, I didn't catch on that he's on the lookout for Roy. And when you watch it a second time, you start seeing all this detail and richness to the film that at first you were oblivious to.
Also with that scene, just as talking about exposition again, like a scene of exposition like that, where they're honestly just, you're setting the story up in a way, it came down to like, all right, what's the business here, to make it more interesting, even if you don't really understand what he's smelling, just like, what can we give them to do, It was as simple as that, just trying to make every moment interesting and kind of offbeat.
I loved also the conflict that halfway through the movie, one wants to rebel and then the other one wants to comply, and that contrast is how when did you guys develop that idea of the fact that the two would react differently about this world?
That was always kind of there, because very early on, there's a Cassavetes quote that he says that he said all the time. That's like, love is the only truth. That's all, stories are about love or fear, and like love is the only truth. That's what all my movies are about. And early on too, talking about scenes between them, that was a touchstone. Just the way that scenes in his movies, they just feel like games, but kind of acting exercises sometimes between 2 characters, and you're seeing people play like emotional chess. So I was like reading a lot about that. But the idea of Sarah trying to get out, or merely caring, stems from like that idea in a meaningless world like Niles lives on. Like we wanted to make a movie that just puts out the idea that there's purpose in caring. Even if stuff feels out of your control, there's purpose in caring, and like love is the only real thing, and our connection to other people is the only real thing. In a meaningless world. So like that's where that came from, is like we need Niles. It takes him essentially the entire movie to pull his head out of his own ass. Like Sarah is the one who tries, but that we really hit that bass note when we started working with Andy and the Lonely Island, and they had great notes on how to make the script better, and it was a lot about Sarah should pursue a way out. Lean into the science. Like, it not only is that a fun thing to kind of indulge, but it makes sense for the character, on her through line. It gives her insane agency.
So for our viewers, to clarify, your writer
Yeah.
and collaborator is Andy Ciara.
Andy
And you
Ciara,
guys,
yeah.
and you guys worked on the script for a very long time, and then you brought it to Andy Samberg,
Yes.
who not only agreed to star in the film, but his production company um, agreed to produce the film. And then you started further developing the script with the two Andys.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. And Becky Sloviter, our amazing producer, and Akiva Schaefer as well, who's part of
What were
Lonely Island.
I mean, you've touched upon a few of the suggestions of the Lonely Island, but what they open up the scope financially of the script and the possibilities, and what other
Yeah.
major suggestions happen?
There were a lot of changes in the third act. It got more steeped in science for sure, like I was describing, and then it just got, it's not necessarily a big budgetary thing, but the comic set pieces got more ambitious because of how genius they are comedically. So that stuff, we really dove into that stuff and just tailored it for Andy
Mhm.
Samberg as well. And it was a lot. It was such a great experience because it was a lot of, just dissecting everything, and it was quality control, and it was like kind of going through the whole thing with a fine tooth comb and really going moment to moment, which is what I love, and what the movie kind of thrives on is the script and the construction of that. Especially when you're making something. We made the movie in 21 days, which is madness, and you at that scale and in that schedule, you're just trying to get it in the can. So you better have a good blueprint, to rely on.
Which segues to the actual production. How I mean, it boggles my mind the amount of detail that went into shooting this repetitive scene after scene. And can you tell us a little bit about shooting the film? I mean, was it
Yeah.
done? Was it done out of sequence?
We shot the entire thing in sequence. No, I'm just kidding. That would be insane. We shot, although it was, they did a great job scheduling it because we started with all the wedding stuff, kind of the bigger, like with most of our actors and kind of the larger scale stuff. And then as the schedule progressed, we wrapped people and kind of the production got more intimate, and it became this Linklater movie, like this two-hander in the desert, which I think really helped with the performances and just the chemistry and the relationship, which was already there, but it just put the actors in a position to really succeed and do their best work. I think Hugh Tron, who is our amazing cinematographer, she is incredible and just a great storyteller. All our department heads, Jason Kisvarde, production designer, Colin Wilkes, our costume designer, they're all just kind of Swiss Army type creatives. And just have a really good intuitive feel for story and tone. And with Q designing the movie in a shot list sense, it was just a few days in prep. Like we had very little time to prep, but talking about the story, not even thinking about what it was going to look like. Just like, what is this moment emotionally? What is this scene about? And then from there, we started building out, a shot list and kind of some storyboards with Legos. We did that in her house. We used Legos to storyboard some of the stunt scenes and an app, an Artemis app on her iPhone for the anamorphic lenses. But
but you had to
it is a timely movie, but you're never seeing the same shot twice.
correct. I mean,
You're seeing
that's what I was
different
getting
shots.
at.
Yeah.
That there is, you watch scene after scene the same scene, but I noticed that you changed the angle, you changed the height of the camera. It's from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Was how time consuming was that to do?
It was incredible, and we're also using these T-series anamorphic lenses, which are not easy lenses to handle. Just in terms of it takes more time to light. So it took time, but everybody was at the top of their game. And the thing I think that we lost was, number of takes for actors, which is why we are so lucky to have Kristen Milioti in our movie, and Andy Samberg in our movie, and J.K. Simmons in our movie, and you know, you could have Meredith Hagner. They didn't have a lot of takes to work with because we were constantly moving the camera. But that's I think what makes it interesting, and also another way of kind of approaching a time loop movie, like using a visual style that is very much based on where the characters are at emotionally, and not just, you know, the novelty of, I don't know if it's a novelty anymore, just like a loop, you know?
Yeah, and as an audience, you never get tired of seeing the same scene because, you know, as you've mentioned and I mentioned, is we're seeing it from a different angle. We're seeing it from a different height. I want to get to the fact that the pupil, you know, the eye opening happens countless of times over and over again. They're waking up and you zero in on their eye. Every time that their eyes open and they wake up, they have different, it's a different emotional take. They have different amount of information as day goes by. How can you tell us from your perspective and also from the actor's perspective that repetitiveness of shooting, you know, the psycho eye waking up and keeping track of okay, this time she's waking up, you know, after knowing that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Was that, I mean, that's extremely compulsive type of work.
Yeah, no, doing a movie like this is fun because I feel like no one was doing it for the paycheck and everyone was doing it with the understanding of what we were after. So everyone took ownership over it and wanted to participate in this game that you're kind of alluding to, which is like, where are we now? And what, you know, like, what does it feel like? And, you know, where is she coming? Kristen and Andy both had copious notes and were kind of constantly checking each other. The only thing that sucks about shooting stuff out of order within a time loop movie is that continuity matters. And sometimes actors would come with ideas for the other side of scenes that we had already shot, you know, and couldn't establish continuity with. There's missed opportunities at the cave, the mouth of the cave, with J.K. Simmons. He had a great idea to like drop the crossbow at the mouth of the cave the first time that we see him. But because he wouldn't have a need, because he'd just get it the next day, but we had already shot the other side of that. And it's like, but everybody was super prepared. I remember the first day of shooting was all of Kristen's wake up stuff. So we started with macro eyeball shots, and all of the stuff with her waking up in her room, just super dark and super tedious. And I actually remember I was thinking about this in January at the film festival, Three Kings. You showed Three Kings and David O. Russell came and he was talking about how in the morning you feel like you're making Citizen Kane, and then in the afternoon you're losing the sun and you waste all the time doing your like beautiful shots in the morning. You just have to scramble to make your day or something along the lines like that. And that was totally my experience. Like the first day of this movie, it was like, oh my God, these eyeball shots look so good. Like, let's just continue to, let's continue to shoot these. And like, now you're upset or not, you know, this has just happened. And then of course, at the end of that day, you're just scrambling to make your day. But yeah, everybody was participating and so enthusiastic just about like making sure the logic fit throughout. That was part of the fun of making it. And
I can only imagine the editing of this film must have been quite a challenge with all. And can you tell us? And also one of the things that I enjoyed watching it is that unlike something like Groundhog Day, that you have just one day, editing wise, narrative wise, there's kind of like a free quality where you use flashbacks and you have two narratives at times going at the same time. I'm answering the question for you. How challenging and fun was the editing process?
It was really challenging. It was, I mean, honestly, for my first one too, this is a cynical way to look at it, but for the, you know, you watch a first cut and then you're in the edit and for a while you're just like kind of forced to reconcile your mistakes. It feels like that for that first couple of passes, you're just like fixing everything you messed up. But getting it to the point where there's stuff that's different in the edit from how it was written in the script. We shot a lot of alt endings. The movie was scripted initially in a different way, opening it up, and you just that's what putting it up in front of friends is for, and other collaborators to see what they think. But it got really fun once we knew the basic mechanics of it were working, and we got to, you know, make it really sing and feel. I do feel like there's a lot of music in it, but I do feel like, especially at 90 minutes, the film has this kind of like, it's not a musical, but there's this musical quality like to it. It's kind of like a ditty, you know. You're kind of it really flies by, and that's a tribute to our editor for sure.
But it does fly by, but then there is moments of complete stillness where
Yeah.
you slow down. The scene in the tent when they actually, it does slow down and they actually
Yeah.
get to discuss philosophy about their lives. And then you go into diegetic sounds, meaning that there is no music underscore, you only hear the sounds of the desert and the fire. Can you tell us about that choice of slowing things down and diegetic sounds and let them just speak?
I was really excited about that. I mean, that's the core of our movie right there. That, you know, that's the scene where they really connect, but it feels as dynamic to me as anything else in the movie because that stillness is earned. You know, like it's this change up, and you kind of have to settle in and get acquainted. You're half the time you're watching them, and their performances are so good, and their faces. We're here a lot of the time, and they're as dynamic as any, you know, the bomb and the cake or or plane crash are. It's Kristen Miliotti's eyes, and, you know, Andy's vulnerability in that moment. It's something that we haven't seen in the movie before. So that was kind of always by design. We wanted to earn that scene in the middle of the movie where you could kind of like sit back, and that scene was way longer on the page, way longer on the page. And that, talking about editorially, that was the challenge with this movie, is we didn't really cut a lot of stuff because it's hard to do that with an intricately structured time loop idea. But there are scenes within scenes. Every beat kind of counts as they're withholding emotion and kind of playing games with one another. So that was a really a challenge on the movie to kind of cut things out of scenes, make sure if the subtext is playing in the same way. But that's one of my favorite scenes, and the dinosaur stuff is one of the first things when we were working on the movie 5 years ago. That Andy CR is a huge Jurassic Park fan, and also as a fan of Magnolia and Paul Thomas Anderson. It's a moment where, like, if we could have, similar to that movie, like the way that frogs fall from the sky and evoke something emotionally, we could just have some dinosaurs on the horizon and have them make sense, both as a spectacle and something unexpected, but also resonate emotionally, because that's what, you know, what it is to fall in love, that transcendent kind of like sense of wonder. If we could earn that, we're good. You know, like we'll at least have that scene be successful.
Well, and it is. The other editorials, I think you've alluded a little bit to it, but it's quite an ambitious editing sequence, is that montage where you have tons of wedding dancing and them doing pranks and dancing, etc., which happens in the middle of the movie as well. How challenging was that long, ambitious editing montage?
That was a beast. I mean, the cutting that, we spent a lot of time on that. That probably was the hardest thing to get right. Shooting it, though, was really fun because every day, because you're block shooting locations before you wrap them, and be like, oh, there's a montage moment here, you know, like let's pick that up as a cap on the day. And the shared tattoos that they give each other. That was a complete improvisation and an idea that Andy and Kristen came up with later on in the shoot, and our amazing makeup head, Galaxy, turned those around super quick. But you know, that's the fun of making movies, having an idea and just going, you know, just picking it up while you can before you lose the sun. So it was a beast to edit. And again, we always kind of saw it as this long sequence, amorphous montage with different music tracks and stuff. But shooting it was so fun because it was like, you know, your treats that you earned within the day once you got past the the big talky scenes, you just got to do a fun, ridiculous moment.
And you've talked about how structured things were and the script. Did you allow Andy and Kristen and JK to improvise off your script?
Yeah, a lot of it was, there was improv, and like every setup I was careful just to be like, all right, we got it, we're great. And a lot of times, I've said this, these performers would do it and be like, all right, that's great. Let me go talk to the grip about the technical problem. And then I pretend to come up with a note while I was pretending to, come up with a note while I was pretending to talk to a grip, because they had already done it so well. And I needed to like think of something to say to them. But you get what you need, and then you open it up before you change the setup and have them do it in their own words and make it better. And then also before we shot, it was so collaborative. Just on the day, they would come with ideas or just moments. Like the moment where Andy and JK are sizing each other up at the bar when they first meet, and he makes a comment about his hat. That's improvised, and we just needed to fill that space for the drinks being poured. And that's just JK Simmons. You know, there's countless examples of that, and that just is committed genius actors.
What about
work with ideas?
What about the hook and the bomb sequence?
Yeah,
the hook, because Andy seems slightly surprised, but at the same time energized by this foreign accent, Kristen, and a hook.
I think maybe it was a lifelong dream of hers to play like a swashbuckling Frenchman in something, and that also just a complete invention of hers in collaboration with our costume designer. You know, we needed something there, but she took it to an amazing length, and that's the best. And there were other scenes within the movie that she would hide that hook in, and then in times just surprise him with it, and it's great. I love that moment.
Tell me about working with your composer, and because the music is quite strong in it, and the choice.
Yeah. Cornbread Compton is a close collaborator of The Lonely Islands. I didn't work with him before, but he's awesome. And he came initially with an idea for like a kind of a Palm Springs exotica tropicalia vibe, like a throwback to like the 50s and 60s like lounge music. And from there, through conversations, it kind of grew into this more modern and kind of more melancholic version of that. But he was tireless, and it was really helpful, again, going back to the edit, to be able to put all kinds of different tracks up and, you know, kind of like pressure test them against like different moments. And some of the early on, for instance, I think the theme that happens, that plays under Niles' speech at the cave, and also happens, you know, when they're connecting over the campfire in the desert. That was one of the first things he just kind of threw together from a couple of references that I gave him, and having that was so helpful and amazing. It kind of like once you get that done, you realize, oh, we have a sound for the emotional core of the movie, and from there you could kind of build a template out.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of emotional core, we've always known that Andy Samberg, the actor, can handle the comedic aspects, but to see the melancholia, the ennui, the sadness that is constantly in every scene in the character, is that something that you knew he had it in him? Is that something that you had to work on him to develop?
I think he read the script and knew he could do it. He said this a lot of times. He's like, he only does projects that he knows he won't mess up. He's very humble in that way, because I think he could do anything he wants to. I think he has that part of him. He just hasn't indulged it as much. And I think he's going to go on. I hope he does more, you know, tonally complex roles and performances, even though the comedy to me, and that's why it was such a thrill working with The Lonely Island, is so influential just on my own sensibility growing up, even from just the idea of making stuff with your friends like they do. But it honestly, he had it, you know, it was we were kind of constantly reminding each other what kind of movie we were in. But he he came so prepared, and he knew that he had it in him, and we never dreamed from those first days of working on the script and just wanting to make something out of film school that we'd get someone like Andy Samberg in our movie. And then once you hear he wants to meet about it, and the opportunity to get him in the movie, you think about it and you're like, no one else could have played this part. It's perfect for him. Thinking about other influences while we were working on the movie, like Punch Drunk Love and Eternal Sunshine, they both star these generational talents and comedians who are doing different, they're zagging on their goofball persona. So like, I think Andy, that's what was exciting to him about it.
And how did Kristen Milotti come about? Did you audition her?
No, Andy met her, just generally Andy Samberg, like a couple months, like right before we started working, and they hit it off and they really connected. And it was right after she did a turn, like kind of an amazing turn in Fargo and also Black Mirror. And she was Tony nominated, Grammy winner. She's a Broadway actress. She's honestly, I think, like a generational talent. Like she's so special as a performer, but never does the same thing twice. So it's very hard to like track her. She's very protean in that way, in her choices. So after Andy met her and they hit it off, we kind of talked about it. And going back to those other movies, Punch Drunk Love and Eternal Sunshine, like they also just have these incredibly traditionally trained actresses from the stage and more serious leaning actresses cast against, these goofballs doing their kind of more pathos driven turn. So she kind of fit that bill, and that was, she was it. We just kind of offered it to her. It was super exciting. And she's a writer too. So like coming in and talking about the script, it's like, it got better there as well,
Which is interesting you bring that up, because I was watching and thinking about Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine, where it was the first time that you saw Kate Winslet allowed to be zany and and crazy and out of control. And Kristen has that sort of same arc in this movie, where she is the zany one. She's the wild one in this one. It's very refreshing to see. Yeah. Anyway, I think we've just gone on and on and on, and I could actually go on talking with you forever about this. Last question before I let you go: did you ever imagine that this film would hit at a time where we find ourselves in this constant sense of alienation and repetition? I mean, there's one moment where Andy says, yesterday, today, tomorrow, it's all the same. And then all of a sudden we're in the middle of this pandemic that we find ourselves in, where yesterday, today, and tomorrow is all converging.
Yeah, we were banking on it. No, it's like insane. Yeah, it's, I hope there's far more grave things happening in the world right now. And I hope our movie could hold a mirror up to just the personal experience of being trapped by a crazy moment, but also be a cathartic sense of, provide some sort of catharsis and let people escape for a second. But I'm just grateful. Again, there were no expectations, Sundance and all, for this thing, other than to make something that felt true to ourselves and everybody that we got to work with. And the fact that it's hitting now, we could not have written it. It's kind of an incredible thing to have that resonance.
I told you before we got on that is watching your film, not just because I've been a long-time fan of you and I adore you, but the fact that this film definitely it's a beacon at a time of complete darkness. Watching it, your film, Spike Lee's Die Five Bloods, are a testament to what cinema is able to do at a time that we feel so isolated and so just in despair, and to be able to see a film like yours and Spike Lee's that are able to guide us through and distract us and make us think is the role of cinema. And I'm just very proud of what you've done for us.
Thank you. I adore you. I adore the festival. I'm so honored to be on this thing. And I just think what the organization and what you're all about is, like I said before we got on as well, it's a shot in the arm to have a resource and a festival like Santa Barbara's to get us through this time and also help us figure out, what we want the world to to be like going forward.
Well, what's great is that this is just the beginning of an incredible career ahead of you. And as I mentioned, you have a next project already lined up with Peter Dinklage, and looking forward to what the future brings to you, Max. Thank you so much. And then we'll be in touch. And everybody, thank you for joining us. And
yeah, thank you.
If you haven't seen Palm Springs, see it. If you've seen it only once, rewatch it and tell all your friends. Hulu. Thank you, Max.
Thank you.